Hi everyone, welcome back to the Zhang Financial Podcast. My name is Patrick. I'm a summer associate here at Zhang Financial, interested in exploring as many areas of business as possible. What you're about to hear is a conversation with myself, Lynn, and Okorie Ramsey, who serves as the chair of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Yes, it is a long name, and I actually was corrected during this episode on what exactly the AICPA represents. But along with topics like this, we cover some of the new priorities he has under his administration as chair of the AICPA, and a lot more topics regarding accounting. Here was that episode. Today, I am joined by two special guests, Lynn Zhang, as well as Okorie Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey serves as the chairperson for the AICPA, which stands for the Association of International Certified Public Accountants. A long name, so we'll refer to it as AICPA for this episode. He also serves as the vice president of Sarbanes-Oxley for Kaiser Permanente. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ramsey.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I am pleased to be here with you.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this conversation. Actually, me and Mr. Ramsey met at an MICPA event, which stands for the Michigan Association of CPAs. And recently, Mr. Ramsey has a notable recognition added to his already impressive resume, serving as the chair of AICPA. I guess just to hop right into the conversation, we wanted to know some of your new priorities for the organization moving forward now that you are in this position.
You got it, Patrick. And let me do a little bit of backstory on the AICPA in the association, because it can be a little confusing.
Okay.
So the AICPA, as most people in the United States are aware of, is the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So that's the AICPA. Now, the association is the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. So basically, yes, so there's a difference between the two. Both of them, if you were to look at an acronym, they both would be AICPA.
Got it.
Yeah, we love acronyms? I said, don't we love acronyms?
Right, exactly. But the AICPA, that organization has a membership of about 460,000 members across the U.S. and in international territories as well. But the association, which you can almost think of it as like a parent company, that it has 690,000 members across the world, because it includes both the AICPA, which is the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, plus CIMA, which is the Chartered Institute of Managerial Accountants, which is more of like I'll say your management accountants across the world are in that organization, which is again another 250-ish thousand members. So on the combined basis, you've got the 690,000 across the world. So I just wanted to kind of level set the difference between the two organizations, both the AICPA specifically, which is more domestic, and then the association, which is really more global.
Got it.
Now, but in terms of the priorities, I will say there are three major priorities that I have, but then there are also three additional that I'm focused on. So the first priority is continuing to innovate and to advance the profession. And so when we think about innovating to advance the profession, it's really looking at how we leverage technology and how we, use AI, how we continue to change what we do and how we do our work to create that interest in our profession and what we do, but also to be ready when, as changes occur in the profession, that we should be at the front end of that, and not only the profession but business in general. So we want to make sure that we're doing the work that ultimately allows us to be prepared for whatever comes. Right, whether it's a global pandemic like we did with in 2020, or if we have changes in the tax laws, or if we have changes in various pronouncements or ESG, how do we make sure that we are prepared for those changes that happen that impact our industry, but also that impact how we handle business, and so that we can ultimately support our businesses and employers, our firms, as they transition with these different changes that occur. The second is instilling integrity into key areas such as sustainability. And so sustainability is really focused on ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. And so when we were thinking about how do we look at the guidance that we have around ESG, we want to make sure that businesses are having supporting documentation that evidences when they are putting ESG types of data into their financial reporting information, such as their footnote disclosures, if they are a publicly traded company, or if they're disclosing certain information, if they're even a private company. We want to make sure they've got the right backup and support for the statements that they're making around ESG. Now, and that's kind of how the businesses look at it. But there's also, if you are a firm that is providing attestation services, so you're basically providing assurance as to the accuracy of that information that's going into someone's financial statements or disclosures, then you need to make sure you've got the right procedures in place to test and validate the accuracy and completeness of that information. So whether you are a company or whether you're a service provider, there are two ways to look at ESG data, and we want to make sure that as accountants and financial professionals, that we're helping businesses ensure that their information is accurate and complete. So a third area, which is, again, these are the top three priorities, would be supporting the next generation of accountants and giving them enhanced opportunities to succeed. So when I think about the work that I do going to various state societies, going to a meeting with students, like I have the great opportunity to meet with Patrick, I want to make sure that they understand the value that the profession brings, why being a CPA is a great career, the longevity you can have. And I often think of this as whether we're in good times or bad times, right? So whether the economy is booming or if we're in a recession, people always need accountants to make sure that the numbers are accurate. And so at the end of the day, it's a recession-proof profession. So why would you not want to be in that? Because there are a lot of times when economies are not going so strong, you see layoffs from major companies. And so but you don't necessarily see that same type of impact in the accounting profession. It may slow some, but not to the same degree that you might see in corporations. Now, a couple of other things that I'm focused on beyond those top three would be making sure that we're collaborating and partnering with our state CPA societies, like the Michigan Society of CPAs. And as I was mentioning to you on my way in, I literally just came from the Oklahoma Society of CPAs. I want to make sure that we are partnering with our state societies in areas where we both have combined responsibilities. So that could be around our advocacy for the profession, whether at a broad level in terms of just profession wide, or with our regulators or our political officials. We want to make sure that those things that are of interest to the profession at large, that we are tied at the hip in making sure that we're doing the right work in those spaces. Or when we're advocating for things like accounting as part of the STEM program, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We're looking at having accounting roll up into the technology piece, because really accounting is more than math. And a lot of individuals think that, it's, because I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we have in the profession, that people think that it's about math. And it is so much more than that. When we're looking at how you think and how you process information, how you tell stories about what the numbers are telling you, these are all the things that our accountants and financial professionals are involved in. But we'll talk a bit about that, I'm sure. And so in addition to that, diversity, equity, inclusion is something that is a priority for me in my year as chairman, but also it's something that's really important for our profession. And so we have to continue to focus on why is this not just something that's good to do, but a strategic priority for corporations, for firms, for government. Because if we don't have those different perspectives and, coming from different backgrounds at the table, we will be losing out on some great thinking, some great minds, some great innovation by not having those seats at the table. So we want to make sure that we're creating that space for everyone to feel like they can be a part of our profession. And then the last point is driving agility. And so I had shared with Patrick when we were meeting before how I have this concept of work-life integration. So I'm not a big work-life balance person, because I believe that at times your work is going to take priority, and that's going to be at the forefront. And at times, your family is going to be in the forefront and take priority. But it is never going to truly be balanced. Right? If you're looking for that balance, I really just don't believe it truly exists. So you have to
Amen.
figure out how you integrate, these different parts of your life together so that you don't feel like you're really missing something, but at the same time, for being having the priorities where you need to be when you need to be there. And so driving agility really focuses on it's a concept that I use within Kaiser Permanente for this year. It's actually my theme at work. And so I'm bringing how I do my work at Kaiser Permanente into what I'm doing with the AICPA and leveraging those themes in terms of how we move the profession forward. So those are my priorities. And some of these things are very much aligned with what the association and the AICPA is focused on as well.
Yeah, I agree. And just a couple of things. I said amen when you mentioned about the work-life balance, because I can tell other kids, I don't tell Patrick because he would have his own mind, but I have two sons, and this is what I tell them. I said, you right now, because they're 25 and 28, and I said, you should have no balance. You should be all work. Then when you get to the age, you have families, you have kids, you are no fun, only work thing would actually bear the results. You can afford some of the more life than work when you need them. So, but this is just, I only have right to tell that to my own kids, not anybody else. And you mentioned the ESG, and that's actually a really interesting point, because we're in the investment business. So for a while, because we don't have the people like the CPAs help, or they're not required to help. So Patrick, what you can see is some of the firm, because see that ESG as not an area to do good, but an area to make some extra bucks. So what they do is they have this one fund. They go in there, they change a teeny bit, or sometimes don't make a change at all. But then they put a ESG, like a stamp on it. Say, now it's ESG. I'm going to charge extra points, percentage because now it's ESG. So, but now the regulation actually says you want to call it as an ESG, you have to show all those things. You have to show the impact of your work in order for you to label it, to correctly label it as ESG. So therefore, the work of, and those kind of work, I would imagine, just like Mr. Ramsey says, it falls down on the CPAs to make sure they're in compliance, because a lot of the work we do is to ensure the reportings and everything is in compliance. So on the next generation, I think we have seen the trend of a little bit of downward trend for the number of the kids pursuing CPA as a career. To make a point, I think a couple years ago, I heard the average age of the tax preparer in Michigan is 62. So, a lot of the CPAs actually we used to work with now as starting retiring. Our firm used to work with starting retiring, and so I can see it can be, and at the same time, the need for the CPA service does not change. Actually, it's in the increasing trend. So I would like to see some of your initiatives, to hear you talk about some of your initiatives on how to change that.
Well, so two things that you raised there that I think are interesting. One is actually the interesting element of the longevity, right, that you can have within this profession. And when I go to various state societies, I see people who are continuing to work into their 60s and sometimes their 70s, but not because they have to, more so because they're still very interested in the profession and they want to be involved, and they still have their wits about them, which I think is great to have individuals who have that that interest and mindset to still, want to be in the profession at that time. Now, I would tell you myself, I don't know that I necessarily want to be in the profession that long or still doing this kind of work at that point. But at the same time, I'm glad to see that people have that interest. Now, what we need to do for the younger generation is we have to be the best at telling our CPA stories about why is this such a great profession, and we have to start looking at engaging with the high schools and the colleges at an earlier level, because you don't really hear stories about, I mean, like when you look on TV, you see, shows about lawyers, you see shows about, physicians. You don't really see shows about accountants. Right. And I've only seen two movies that I'm aware of where there was an accountant as a primary person, right, in the story. It's just not something
there's a movie.
see.
It's named Accountant. Remember that?
The accountant was one. That was at least that was in the name. There was also a movie called Something New, where there was a woman named Sana Latham who actually served as an accountant, but it was more of a backstory, right? And but you don't really hear that very often. So we have to tell our story. Why is the accounting profession the coolest profession around? Which is something that we kind of tagline in California as, CPA stands for coolest profession around, because the idea is that we do some really cool things. We impact the profession, or really businesses and economies, in major ways. When you think about the impact that we had during the pandemic, right, when many people were losing their jobs, and there were up to as many as 40 million people who lost their jobs during 2020. And while a lot of that has come back around, you're still seeing, because we're not quite in a recession, but we're not quite out of a recession. So there's just this teetering, right, on the brink, right, of, are we or aren't we, in terms of recession. And so you're seeing companies slowing down. You're seeing, you're seeing inflation still, at higher levels, which makes, capital harder to get. Right. So there's just a lot of challenges in that space. But back to your question, is that ultimately we have to, again, be on the college campus. We have to be at the high schools. We have to be communicating why this is such a great profession, but also how do we make it easier to get into the profession? So how do we not, while we want to make sure that the education requirements remain strong, and that people who are coming into the profession have the technical expertise that they need to have that background skill set to come into the profession, but yet at the same time, ensure that they have balanced skills that will allow them to really have longevity in the profession, but also helping to tell the story of all the different things that you can do. Because a lot of times individuals, as I was sharing earlier, think that I have to be good at math. Actually, no, you don't. We have Excel. Right? We have calculators. We have tools that can help you on the math side. But what we need you to do is for you to be someone who can be a great storyteller, who can actually interpret the numbers and tell the story behind what do the numbers mean, who can actually analyze information and to help you think through how does this impact the business decisions that you're making to advance your organizations. That's really where the value comes in. The math, that's the easy part, right? Because anyone can do that. You can even get a bot to do that. So it doesn't even have to be a human, right? So we need to continue to move those things that are, I will say, less interesting out, and have people working on the things that really are more about how do you create greater value for organizations and for firms that you might work for. So those are some of the things that I would say that we have to focus on. And the AICPA is working on that. One of the initiatives is through the CPA Evolution, which is the new CPA exam, where students will be focusing still on the accounting, tax, and technology spaces, but then having core disciplines that would be in technology or audit or in tax, where they will have a deeper dive. Like either one of them, you would be still a CPA, but there's a greater focus in those given spaces so that you can hone your skills in your preferred area of interest. Because what we do still need is for people to be deep in their understanding of accounting, but broad in terms of their understanding of business. Right. And so I'm thinking of how do these, these factors that I mentioned earlier about making sense of the numbers, being able to, understand analytics, Understanding how do I interpret information to help my organization make better business decisions, and having a seat at the table when we're thinking through those new ventures, whether it's maybe we're doing an acquisition or maybe we're doing a disposition where we're selling off a business. Right? How do I think about the impact of these business decisions for the long run? And those are the kinds of skills that we need to make sure that we're building within the individuals who are entering the profession. And so we have to really focus on going into the schools in the colleges and universities and getting them to support that type of education, because you don't necessarily see a lot of that today.
Yes, completely.
I think hearing that actually, as a person who is a prospective person who wants to achieve the CPA designation, that's actually pretty exciting, because one thing I remember Lynn telling me about the CPA is that accountants aren't just the people who just crunch the numbers, go into Excel and log everything. They also provide solutions. They provide, within that context, different solutions, different paths to achieve the core successes within a business. And I think that new integration of having a concentration within something, having something that you're an expert in, that not every single accountant will have the same level of insight that you have, is pretty exciting. Just not everybody's going to be the same accountant after taking the exam, but everybody has their own expertise and specialty within the CPA designation. I think that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, and I told Patrick, I said, I personally know actually a few of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 company is all from the CPA background. They all still hold CPA designations because that's instant credibility. People know that you are detail-oriented. You know how to interpret the numbers. That's what the CPA designation gives you. And which is so important in today's world, because I want to go back to nowadays, a lot of, before when I started, I remember we do the CPA calculation. You're not even allowed the calculators. So we crunched every number with a pencil and a pen, notebook. So then, of course, then we have the calculators, right? Before it was abacus. The abacus, yes. And then the abacus, and then you're starting the calculators, and then so now it's the AI, right? It's the AI, and the AI is well recognized. They can literally put any numbers together. They can do Excel sheets for you. They can do what? So what, in your view, as you see the AI would impact the CPA profession and in the areas that we practice?
Great question. Thank you for that, Lynn. What I would say is that you're the focus on AI. If you're not leveraging AI or bots or some type of automation technology in your work, you will be a CPA of the past, right? So I really do not believe that AI will replace CPAs, but AI should enhance what a CPA does. It takes I'll say the more routine, the less valuable information in what we do out, because giving that to, again, the bot or leveraging through technology to eliminate some of that work that would be, I'll say, more repetitive, redundant, work that a lower level professional could do, but doesn't really add the most value. So if we can leverage tools and technology to help us do those kinds of things, that will free up our CPAs and our accountants to do more analytical thinking, more strategy, things that really will help to do more in the terms of innovation and collaborating with people. So I'm a big fan of technology, and it's just a matter of how do we make sure we use it in the right way and that we put the appropriate controls around it. Because the things, especially like when you think about rapid process automation, which is RPA or bots, or even things like Chat GPT, that if you don't have the right controls and regulations around it, you could have a situation of where you're utilizing technology that could do things very quickly, very badly, very wrong, right? Because you haven't set it up well. Right. So I always say that with bots that we need to put up a lot of the controls and make sure that we understand what the outcomes we anticipate to be, before we put it into production. So it's like you want to do that in your test environment. Make sure that the outcomes that you anticipate are what you actually get versus just saying, well, we're going to develop a bot, we're going to put it into production and let it go. Because if we do that, let's say that now we put that in and it's not the right, we don't get the right results. Well, that bot can do a ton of things really badly, really quickly and wrong. And then that goes into our financial statements and we have inaccurate data. So we don't want to do that. Same thing with ChatGPT. Well, if you're using ChatGPT and you're not putting, again, the right controls and boundaries around it, you could have people leveraging that information without really having where you're taking the thinking out of it. Like, I think things like ChatGPT are very great tools. You can do a lot very quickly with it, but how do you validate the accuracy of that information that you're getting from ChatGPT? Right? And because I've heard situations where someone might use ChatGPT for like a diagnosis, right? When they're trying to analyze what information, they say, well, you ask it a question and it spits out this answer, but have you validated that answer is really accurate? Have you bumped it up against anything else to ensure that it's consistent with what you would expect and not necessarily just taking its conclusions as reality? We need to make sure we've got, again, the bells and whistles around it to ensure that we're confident in the accuracy of that information. So I believe, again, technology is amazing, and I think that's really how we're going to drive the profession forward from an innovation perspective. But we do need to make sure we've got the right regulations around it so that we don't stub our toe unnecessarily because we didn't really think through that, how we could best leverage technology.
Yeah, I like, and I especially liked your point of saying what we ought to see AI is, it's not going to replace the human value, but rather, especially in the CPA business, we should view it as it's going to take out the tedious routine work, but make us to be able to focus more on the value added. I often think back in when I started the CPA business industry. I'm a tax accountant. I'm a tax CPA. And so we used to, do you remember, we used to spend so much time to do the data entries, try to get the numbers onto the form. That used to be, right? That used to be, you need to fax the number in. People try to put it. They don't put it right. You put a number in again. And so that used to be the most time consuming. And we wasted tons of time on that part versus the part to look at the numbers and look and say, what are the planning opportunities in those numbers? That become almost, by the time that comes, the planning opportunity comes, you almost spend all your chargeable hours in a CPA firm in trying to get the numbers in right? Yeah, because then you spend less time on the planning part because you're afraid you're going to overbilling the clients with too many hours. So I think the value of the AI is we can see nowadays with the different softwares and everything, we want to see is so that we can effectively eliminate the time or reduce significantly the time we spend on getting the numbers to the forms, but spending more time looking at what are the planning opportunities, solutions we can provide to clients, for instance, tax savings, etc., based on those numbers that AI helped us to put onto the forms. Right?
Exactly,
you agree?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So do you have any other questions? I know you have quite a few long lists of questions, Patrick.
I do. I also just wanted to round out this conversation about what the future of CPA looks like. We also got a few questions from individuals within the firm who are interested within pursuing the CPA. This question is more specifically from an individual named Tyler.
Yeah.
He was a former investment banker at Morgan Stanley, just passed his CFA and got that designation, but now he's interested within tax planning and pursuing the CPA as a designation. He's currently doing his master's for that. His question had to do with AI. It had to do with ESG and possibly the future of the CPA designation. But I think we got to cover that AI should be used as a tool and should advance the profession of
so
CPAs.
We can focus more on the value added. Yes, correct.
ESGs is like Lynn said, we're going to continue to get more nuanced within this field and make sure that it's actually providing positive value for our communities.
Yes, that's actually, it's going to make our profession more important, the current focus on ESGs, because we need to be the person validate that.
Yes,
exactly. And I would say that just the relevancy of the CPA, it's never been more important. And again, to make us that much more valuable in the work that we do. To your point, Lynn, just leveraging technology so that we take the mundane, take the routine, out of the process, and let the great minds that are in the profession focus on the value prop, right? How do we provide greater value, whether it's to our clients or within our corporations, so that because they need us to do the thinking. We can use the bots to do the math, right? Again, or just putting the information on spreadsheets and all that. But how do we again create the knowledge, right? That takes data and creates insights that you can then do to grow your business.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part. But to ask Tyler's question, is there anything else that we should probably look out for within the CPA designation that we might not be catching right now, or the mainstream might not be more interested right now?
Well, when I think about it, is I just think about the future, what's coming down the pike. That there's a lot of things that we should be thinking of. The first is, how do we make sure that we are upskilling and reskilling our CPAs because it's not just about those who are coming in the profession, it's about those who are already in it, right? And so what got you there won't keep you there. And so you'll always have to be honing your skills, strengthening your skills in terms of where you focus your time. And that's so it's like that lifelong learning is something that we need to make sure that we continue to stay on top of. Because we don't really know where the economy is going. I mean, there's been a discussion of a potential recession or downturn in the economy. How do we help prepare organizations when we do see that coming? How do we help, right, the organizations to continue to thrive in spite of disruption and downturns in the economy, making sure that our skills are sharp, to support businesses in those spaces. And then when we do see downturns in the economy, we also tend to see greater innovation, right? Because that downturn, or I'll say growth and de-acceleration, you see an acceleration in innovation and just change, because people are thinking, how do I, in this time where things are not going so well, how can I do something better? How can I do something different to make whether it's to make a buck or to just have a greater impact? And so with that comes the risk of not having the right regulation, tied into that, because innovation sometimes does outpace regulation, right? And so we want to make sure that we do have the right regulation in place for these changes that we might be seeing. We also have to make sure that we're preparing for Generation Z, what they're interested in. And so, Patrick, this comes to you, right? The things that you might be interested in terms of what gets you to the corner office will be different than what the past generations. Today's generation is not interested in working for 20 to 30 years, anticipating getting a pension and staying on the same job. That doesn't happen anymore. Now you all are interested in, how do I work in an environment that I feel like I'm making a true impact, in terms of the work that I do, the value that I bring, that it's more than just I'm here for a job. I want to feel like I'm impacting the world in a positive way. So when I think about ESG, the social, the governance, aspects, that your generation is just more interested in how, the impact of what I do, not just to go to a job. It's not about just a place that I go. It's about the value that I bring, right? And so understanding that, how do we create that environment where you're able to show your talents and bring the innovation that you have to the table and do it more rapidly than feeling like, well, I've got to pay my dues and be on this job for 20 years before I'll be heard. Now, what I will also tell you, though, is that what I believe, and this is again just Okorie's opinion, the things that get you in the corner office don't really change, right? So what we may say we want today, that in terms of, like work-life balance, or I want flexibility, I want, all these different things, that you may have that, but you also have to understand what you might be giving up to get that. Right? Because the things that will get you to where you might want to go, which again, in my hope for many of you, your generation, that you want to be that next generation of leaders who are in those corner offices, even if the always doesn't exist, you're the decision maker, right? And making the big bucks, right? So, but you have to do the things which do require that you get that expertise. You show your capabilities and the impact that you're able to have. You're able to develop people, right? You're able to think, outside the box. You're able to, really, kind of be a rainmaker, make things happen, and also bring different perspectives to the table. There's a lot to that, right? And so it's not an easy path, but if you're interested and you're motivated, those things can happen. But it's really kind of that combination of, learning from the past, but putting it to a stone, putting your spin on what that means to be successful and in making things happen. So I just want to, those are kind of things that I'm thinking that we will see kind of going like 5 years out, 10 years out. Those will be some of the things that we'll be anticipating in the future. I also believe that we'll likely see some scrutiny of what we've done in terms of ESG reporting, right? Because right now we're in the process of putting those controls in place. We're doing the attestation of the information, but with that will come a time where people will now audit and say, well, did they get it right? Right? And so we need to make sure that we're putting in the right documentation support so that when those audits do come, that we can withstand that scrutiny, which I think is a great sign, because it says that, hey, test me, check me out, right? I mean, it's when you put up the fight and say, well, why are you looking at my information, or you're trying to support your validation of information, just have an open door. Come on in, take a look. I can withstand the review that you might have of the information because I know that I put the right documentation in place. So how do we make sure that we're prepared for those questions that might be coming? But those are some of the things that I think that we're going to be seeing, based on economists and also futurists of what's likely to be coming in the next 3 to 5 years.
Awesome.
And I think also, if I stand correctly, that the AICPA does play an important role in helping our government in the policy making. We are as strong as we know. Our policymakers sometimes are not the best in numbers and in the real world experience. So we play and we are the ones who understand the ins and outs of what is needed. So can you give us some examples of the work that AICPA is doing and has been doing in shaping our policy making?
For sure. Well, so one of the things that I like to, that I say, especially around, the impact of the pandemic, but even great beyond that, would be that when we're looking at tax legislation, when companies were, economies were going down and businesses were trying to just survive, we were at the forefront of looking at tax policy and determining what should the government do as it relates to individuals and businesses paying taxes, and also giving them the breaks that they needed. We were very involved in the PP loan process, right, and understanding what we needed to do to ultimately help businesses because I won't say they were thriving, but they were definitely trying to survive, right, and we were very impactful in that way. When you think about small businesses being a large part of our economy, that how we help those businesses continue to grow, which is something that I believe the CPAs are very much involved in, because you are looking at the fundamentals of how these businesses work and what do they need to ultimately sustain performance, but then grow. We are very much involved in that as well. We're very much involved in, we have audit guides in accounting legislation that we are involved in helping to establish, and with ESG in terms of reporting and the attestation guidelines, we're very much involved in that. So we're involved in all these different aspects of how the profession will likely continue to grow, and in helping our policymakers think through what are the right decisions. And we're We seek to be bipartisan. So it's not about the right, it's not about the left. We're really on the side of business and the numbers and what's the right answer. Right. So it's not really about, we're working with the different policymakers or even the regulators. We're trying to make sure we're making the right decisions to allow businesses to thrive. So those are just some of the, I'll say, more recent areas where we have been very focused in that ultimately helping organizations grow.
Right, right. I think so you talk about the cool part of our profession. I always said we are ultimately the person. I mean, I know that might be an overstatement, but I always tell people that if you look at all the numbers, the SP 500, the company stocks prices, I said, where do you think those stock prices come from? It's ultimately is from the numbers that's created by CPAs on their annual report, on their quarterly reportings, on their, right? So those are ultimately, if you drill down, how people decide that this company has growth potential, doesn't have growth potential, they look at the numbers. So we are the people who tells the story, and the rest of the people make that decision based on the story that we tell.
And I would say that, part of that as well is that for accountants to continue to be, extremely valuable, it's more than just like reporting the numbers, right? You have to be someone who not only reports the numbers, but you have to, we call it, instead of just reporting the news, you're making the news. And what do I mean by that? Right? In making the news, if you're doing, again, like a major deal, whether it's say, an acquisition or a merger, that you have to be at the table as the accountant, as the financial mind, as to how do we make sure that this deal we're getting the best deal in doing this, or that we're making the right decision, so that if we look 2 or 3 years down the line in terms of what were the benefits that we anticipated that we would get by entering this transaction, that we achieve those results. Right? The accountants have to be in the room to have those conversations, but if you are not in the room, there's a problem. Right.
Yeah.
And so how do you ensure that you have a seat at that table where those decisions about where the company is going are being made? You want to be part of the strategy. You don't want to be the person who they've made the decisions and now you're just accounting for the numbers.
Right.
That's not where our value comes in. We need to be at both. Right. We need to make sure the numbers are right, but we need to be making sure that we're into the conversations before they actually make decisions, so that we can be a part of that and help them make the best decisions.
Right. And you also mentioned the integrity of the profession. I think to emphasize that, the accountants probably is the profession requires the utmost, the highest ethical standards, because you got to have the backbones to say, no, that's wrong, to the people who pay your bills.
Yes. You're talking truth to power. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a huge, element of what while I would say that I don't want us to be focused on we're the only ones who say no. We want to understand like what's the why? What are you trying to achieve?
Yes.
Right. And so let's talk about how we can make sure that in an appropriate way, we're achieving those goals that you're trying to accomplish, but not just say, well, it's always no. Sometimes it's maybe, right? But it depends on these factors, right? To basically allow that to occur in the right way, so the business is making, again, to your point, decisions that really are bound by integrity and things that we can stand behind. Because if you lose that, you lose it all. Right? Because if you take a shortcut once, well, eventually you're going to have to take a shortcut again, right? And you do it again, and then it becomes kind of your norm, right? Versus we are going to do the right thing by organization and by the public who is entrusting us to make sure that information is accurate and complete. And when I think about the CPA, it is certified public accountant. Right, you're doing this in the interest of the public, and so those are the individuals that we always have to make sure that we are appropriately representing within our profession, and that's why we have such a great reputation, because people know that and they see that time and time again. It is tested, right, that you can trust your CPA to do the right work and to stand behind the numbers, and if it's not right, raising their hand and saying that this isn't the right answer, this isn't the right way that we do this, because they know that. So I feel that it is a truly trusted profession. We are trusted advisors, and it's, again, the coolest profession around, something that I think that we all should be looking at. How do I become an accountant? Right, an accountant, and I do these other things, but let's get more into the profession.
Right. I think we're really the foundation of, it might be overstatement, but I truly believe as CPA, we are the foundation of our economy, because honestly, if the books are not right, our financial system will crumble, because then the stock market will crash. Look at Aaron stock, right? If the books are not right, then the stock price will definitely be very negatively impacted. And here goes our entire financial system, the foundation of the capital market. So the coolest profession. And so because we're in the investment business, so we need to talk about, so we talk about the big pictures, the economy, the market. So for the average people, right? Average people on the street, every person day to day. So what's in your view, the importance of the accounting, of the CPA, of the tax planning for people in their overall financial success?
Well, I really believe that you definitely need, a CPA or someone who's helping you with your, financial planning, and your, just because they can ask you the questions that you need to be thinking about for whatever your financial goals are. Right. So if you want to retire by a certain age, well, you need an accountant to help you think through, well, based on your financial goals, what you want to accomplish, how much money you need to ultimately achieve those goals. The accountant can really be involved in helping you make the right decisions, and telling you what adjustments you have to make to ultimately achieve the goals that you have, or telling you that if you don't want to do that, well, what changes do you need to adjust to make sure to either you're gonna have to change your expectations around what you want, because ultimately you won't be able to achieve that if you don't make certain decisions. So having a good financial planner, having someone to help you think through different tax strategies, how can you save more than clearly save more than you make, but or not save more than you make, but just how you make sure that you're saving appropriately, and that you can leverage different tax strategies to your advantage. Those are all the things that a CPA can support you with. Now, what I will tell you is that you need to make sure that you're getting a CPA who has the understanding of that information, because not all CPAs, just as we kind of started at the beginning of our call, that you will have CPAs who are focused in different areas. Some are focused in tax, some are focused in technology, some are focused on assurance and providing audit work. And so you want to go to a CPA who has the depth of skill in the area in which you need them to be really adapt at, right? And so not all CPAs are made the same, but they all have very strong strengths, but you want someone who has a specialty in the area that you're most interested in. So in a tax planning space, getting someone who really focuses in that space is going to be really important.
Yes, it's same as attorneys. This is what I find out. Every attorney has different specialty. You find one you think he should understand that, they don't. So I always said, back in the days, I'm the one who put the Kellogg Company's entire tax return in place. But nowadays, that corporate return is a little bit rotten, the knowledge, and I don't touch that area anymore. But for the tax planning, what we tell clients, I always said, just remember, you always have another child in your household that never leaves, always needs your support. That's Uncle Sam.
There you go.
So anything you make, you gotta share to that person.
Well, just due to the time, I just wanted to make sure if there was one last question that I could answer for you, that would be great. That just to kind of wrap up our conversation. Is there anything else that you have top of mind?
I actually think that was a really good question for the end of our conversation. I was just going to say, for our audience out there, you heard it here first. You heard it from the chair of the AICPA, as well as the perspective of, I think, in my opinion, one of the best CPAs within tax. So for our audience out there, the importance of tax planning and doing it right with the CPA.
Yep, doing it right, and make sure that you let your CPA to tell the right story. Make sure you use your CPA the right way, and help to spread the word that CPA is the coolest profession under the sun.
Profession around. And last thing, Lynn, I just want to share my appreciation for having Patrick join me, in this conversation with the two of us. That, I believe that this is also, a great way to showing the next generation of how we have these conversations to be a part of the conversation, right? Versus, well, you got to be in the profession for 15 years before you can have this kind of dialogue, because what you're interested in and what he's interested in, and many of the individuals within his generation, that we're speaking to them in this conversation, right? So Patrick, thank you for having the initiative and reaching out to have this conversation, and Lynn, you for opening the door to say, I want you to be a part of this as well. So really great way to lead.
Aren't you feel so hopeful when you look at the quality of our future professions?
I do, no doubt.
Again, thank you for joining us for this conversation. It was an absolute privilege to have two CPAs here and really pick your brains about the profession as well as in the future and beyond. So thank you so much again for joining us. And
thank you. If you ever come that way, please visit us.
I surely will. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Zhang Financial Podcast. If you have any feedback or have any questions for our upcoming guests, please email them to podcast@zhangfinancial.com. We'll see you next time.